Hello, welcome to the thatshelf.com Sundance Roundtable, post-mortem, whichever way we want to put it. We did some amazing coverage this year with a whole bunch of people, some of whom hadn't actually experienced the insanity that is Park City, but we wanted to get together and sort of introduce each other, introduce ourselves to those of you that are watching, and give you sort of a taste of what we experienced at this year's festival.
Hi everyone, I'm Shane. I'm new to the team. This is my first Sundance, and it was a good experience for me. I watched 20 films, and most of them I liked to varying degrees, and the platform was pretty easy to navigate. It was very intuitive, so I appreciated that, and overall it was a good experience.
And Rachel, I think this is also your first Sundance, although we've sort of collaborated a little bit in the past on some of our previous outlets.
Yeah, as far as the day job goes, in the past, I've been your producer, editing your coverage from Sundance, but this was my first time attending virtually. So I've been familiar with their programming, but this is the first time I've actually watched it myself. I did not think my first Sundance would be experienced from my couch in Toronto. I thought I'd actually get to Utah. But yeah, it was an experience. I think, I'm sure we'll talk about it, but I've done a number of virtual festivals now, and this one was not as good as I thought it would be.
There you go. Manuel, talk about your Sundance experiences.
Well, this one was very different. Jason, as you know, it's when you're in Park City, I think part of the Sundance experience has a lot to do with the atmosphere that the city creates, and you sort of feel like you've been sort of trapped in a winter hellscape, and your only escape is the movies that you're watching. So it makes any kind of experience in movie theaters that much more exciting. So I missed that, even though I did enjoy not freezing outside of theaters for 45 minutes trying to get into a movie, and not rushing from like one end to Park City to the other and wondering whether I would be making it in time. And I'm sure we'll talk about the movies later, but in that sense, the comfort with was both nice, but it made me miss the discomfort that Park City sort of requires of you.
Victor, last year you got joined in as part of the celebration of you being chosen as the emerging critic from the Toronto Film Critics Association, but also you kicked butt last year and you did a whole bunch of stuff this year. I'm just wondering how the difference in experience of the Park City version of Sundance versus this year's.
It almost seems unfair. I just can't believe how smooth everything went. Part of the festival experience is just scrambling from theater to theater, and I'm pretty sure I spent about half my time in a festival lining up, waiting to get into movies. So usually I have to write my reviews in line, and this time I could just kind of sit on the couch and kind of do it from the comfort of home. It was different. It wasn't bad, just different in a new kind of way.
Yeah, so it was my first Sundance. It was exciting, nice. I would never go on a normal day because so much of what we see comes to hot dogs. But it was nice to, get a head start and actually see films as the buzz was coming out. I think I kind of agree more with Rachel on the virtual platform. It was a bit of a mixed bag for me, but overall, it was definitely more of a positive experience. We still got the snow here. It was like Sundance in Toronto, but yeah, a great way to spend quarantine.
And did you guys do any of the nonsense, like the virtual stuff, going to virtual parties or anything like that?
No.
I did it once. It was kind of weird, but cool also. I got to like speak with people and see like their video, and it was kind of trippy.
Sundance sent me a Oculus Quest 2 headset so I can take part in the New Frontier program. So I tried some of that, but it was kind of clunky. And a lot of times I would sign in to try an installation. Like it would put you in a virtual space and you would go through the gallery. But then when you would click on an installation, it would kind of take you out of it and you'd have to download it. So it wasn't as immersive as I was hoping it would be.
Yeah. One of the weirdest things that I did last year at Park City, the last thing I actually did was there was a VR, underwater VR, that you were basically floating in a pool. with a Samsung camera on you, and you're sort of doing that. And to be honest, that's the only time that I've ever found VR actually engaging. I usually find it really annoying because of the way that the pixelation works just on the headsets, even on the Oculus 2. So I know VR is a huge part of what they're actually pushing for. But between VR and parties, for me at Park City, I tend to not do that. I'm either lined up for movies, or I'm watching movies. I have better things to do as the old man than trying to get into some guest list on Main Street and feeling like hell that I get kicked out because I'm not cool enough. Manuel, you're much cooler than me. You probably got into all the good parties.
No, I do not. I'm not that cool yet. Same as with Victor, I got the Oculus 2 and I sort of play around with it, but I found that most of the VR specific things you needed like extra, like it needed to be tethered, and the things that they sent us, we couldn't tether them to the computer because I don't have like high enough graphics on them. So I actually didn't get to use, but I did sort of get to meet up with some people who I normally see at Sundance, and got to see their little avatars jump whenever they would hit the space bar, which is I guess kind of fun. But I mostly stuck to watching movies on the couch.
There you go. So speaking of movies, I might as well start with Rachel, who brought in Mr. Murph. What?
Yeah,
he's
better off here than screaming in the background.
Yeah. What was? I mean, you saw primarily features. What was your experience like? What did you think of the caliber of the films that played here this year?
I'm going to say a lot of them were just fine, and perhaps I'm spoiled because I've done, TIFF, I've done New York Film Festival. These were more on the level of, I'm going to say something even South by Southwest, even maybe less than that. I've enjoyed a lot of the movies I've seen at South by Southwest more than these Sundance movies. Again, that could just be what I was picking based on the options available. There are movies that I really liked. I really did like Mass. I really liked Coda. I really liked Street Gang, but a lot of the other ones were just fine. Okay movies, like 2 out of 5 star.
There you go. Shane, your experience. I mean, you hear so much about what Sundance is or isn't. What was your experience like actually tackling the films?
In terms of the quality, I think, I mean, looking back on like my top 10 lists and so on, I've seen better Sundance films in previous years based on what has made my top 10 lists. But I think the docs were still pretty good. Those are my favorite films from the festival, like President and Summer of Soul and the Nan Fu Wang film In the Same Breath, and Flea, of course. Those are my favorite films of the festival. So I think on the doc side, it was still pretty strong. I think the narrative features may have, gone down in quality a little bit. But I think I enjoyed pretty much almost everything I watched, so it wasn't too bad.
I mean, for all the years that I've gone to Sundance, I'm probably 90-10 in terms of percentage of seeing nonfiction versus fiction. There's some major films that I just don't see at Sundance that are theatrical or fiction films because I'm so focused on the nonfiction. Yes, a bunch of them come to Hot Docs, but some of the greatest films that I will see that come into Sundance are for sure the nonfiction. Summer of Soul, as many of you will know because I'm going on and on about it, it's just amazing. I thought it was a phenomenal film. But yeah, I didn't get a chance to see Flea till after it won the award, and it's beautiful. It's incredibly well done. I loved Glitch in the Matrix, which would have been wild to see with an audience. Pat, I know you're also doing even more immersed with docs. You've seen them after the fact, but it was something different about watching it as part of the Sundance rollout.
I mean, it was definitely, like every festival, it's always nice to watch them when you've heard really nothing and kind of form your own opinion. I mean, I think the festival got off to a really good start. I mean, if you think like Flea and Summer of Soul on both playing opening night, just, I mean, set the bar. Yeah. And I think Flea was definitely the most original and interesting film, both formally and in terms of the storytelling. It just knocked the other docs out of the park. I loved Misha and the Wolves, though. I thought that was just such a engaging, twist a minute true crime film, sort of in the vein of The Imposter or Three Identical Strangers. I was surprised that didn't win anything at the awards, but I mean, Netflix picked it up, so that's a good deal. overall for the dramas, nothing really surprised me, but I mean, I thought the ones that were strong really stood out. But I mean, those were also like Land and Passing. So films that really, I guess, use the festival more as like a launch pad than to be a chance for discovery. But overall, I think like of the 24 I saw, I only really disliked one. So
What was the one?
We're All Going to the World's Fair.
Hmm.
I thought that was just the stupid, I don't know. Watching like people on Zoom is one thing when you're working, but in a movie, I don't know. It was the one where like, why am I watching this? But
Well,
I know
look,
I'm in the minority.
I watched an 85-minute documentary about watching people on Tinder. So
Right.
like we all take our choices. Manuel, you've obviously gone through this stuff. How much do you focus on international cinema in terms of feature films, or are you primarily looking at the American stuff?
I tend to focus a lot on the Latin American sort of films, so I saw a lot of those out, and even Spanish language. So something like El Planeta was one of the films that I knew nothing about, and I was so taken with. And something like Son of Monarchs was also something that I had on my radar, because of Tenoch Huerta, and I was impressed. I will say that, echoing everyone, I feel like the feature fiction slate was maybe not up to par, and I couldn't figure out whether this was like, we're a year into COVID, so has production like not been? Are people saving the films for later festival? Like I couldn't figure out, because the last couple of years that I've done Sundance is like first few days of like everything I loved, and I knew that I'd be talking about it for months to come, and I don't know if that'll be the case with the fiction films. But a lot of the great stuff was coming out of the nonfiction stuff. I think the other ones that maybe haven't been mentioned, one that I love was Ailey. And similar to Summer Soul, it's just like some of that footage is just fantastic to see, and to sort of really bask in sort of his genius. and I just love when especially nonfiction films let me do that.
Pat, you're gonna have to remind me what the hell the title is. I have such festival brain, but the film about the kids in Texas that are basically proto cops.
Oh
Sorry?
my God.
Oh, you're talking about
Here at the Ready? Is that what it's called?
At the Ready. Yeah.
At the Ready.
Yeah.
So, Manuel, I'm very curious, as somebody now living in the United States, what you thought about that film, if you had a chance to see it.
I left terrified. I mean, those first sort of 35 minutes are a horror film. I could not fathom that this was a real thing. I could not fathom that high school Latino kids were so excited to become Border Patrol agents that they would join after school programs where they would practice drug raids. And then I was more surprised that the film really goes into places that I didn't know it was going to go, and ends up being much more hopeless and hopeful than I anticipated, and that I probably even I almost turned it off 35 minutes in, because I thought, like, I can't handle this. This is propaganda at like the nth degree. The program, not the documentary itself. But I'm glad I stuck with it, because it is really something, and everyone should watch it.
I bring that. It's a shame. My brain doesn't remember titles as well as it used to. That for me was one of the great films of the festival, because that's for me exactly what I go to Sundance for, is a film like that. And it's funny, I'm the neurotic person who will never shut that down the movie. I don't care if I'm hating it 5 minutes in, I will stick it out. Some of the films I hate the most are ones that I've subjected myself. I would probably be a happier person. But that film in particular, I have never seen something as sophisticated and nuanced that explains in a very eloquent way the differing perspectives and personalities within a community, which is so often homogenized, even from those within the community, right? That we want to believe in a certain way that how is it that 35 to 40% of the Latino population in the United States is voting for somebody who wants to have kids in cages? How does that happen? And I think in a really amazing way, this film actually tackles that. And so, A, thank you for watching until the end, because I'm the person who's super judgy if you weren't. And B, I think it's absolutely integral, not only for the people sort of outside the community, the Canadians looking in, but I think there's an incredible look at everything that's taken place in El Paso, and all of these vagaries of that. We want to simplify things so much. Sundance at its best for me is that film that will challenge you, that will kick your ass. And I didn't see many films that did that, but that was absolutely one for me. Victor, what was your response to the films, and were there any that sort of completely rocked your world?
Well, I'm kind of neurotic before a festival begins, and I go through every title on the slate, whether it's a festival with 30 titles or with 200 titles. I rank them, I score them, and I color code them.
Amazing.
So going into Sundance, I was very excited to see a lot of films. And then at the end, I was filling out the IndieWire critic poll, and you have to kind of rank your top 3, top 5. And I was like struggling to come up with 5 films that really moved me. So I would have to say that the docs were much stronger than the narrative features. But one thing that did stand out to me, again, was a New Frontier program. It was called NAMU, and it's only about 7 or 8 minutes long. And it's like the first 10 minutes and up. Maybe it caught me at the right time when I was just festival worn out, and it was pulling at my heartstrings. Like, I'm going to be thinking about that one for a long time.
Rachel, you talked about navigating all this stuff and getting through. What was it specifically that you thought did not work about their system? Was it a technical reason or just a logistical reason?
I mean, well, first of all, not having the app available outside of the US was, kind of a bummer, because I think that would have been a better experience just in terms of playback quality. And then having gone through different virtual festivals already, they've been using, I found, much better platforms. I don't know if they were all Shift 72, but it was just, that to me was a better overall experience. Yeah, I don't know, for me, it was just the timing of the films, the weird booking, like one in a 4-hour window, the weird second screening layout. And maybe it's just that I'm not used to the Sundance model, but I found that I struggled with some of those time slots, or opening night having to choose between Coda and Summer of Soul, and you couldn't, reserve 2 in advance at the same time, and had to kind of take your chances afterwards that it would still be available to get in. So those are things that I think could be done in maybe a better way. And talking to some fellow critics who are online in Europe who were, 3 a.m. watching movies, because that was the only option. So it was kind of, it is an American festival, but when you have an international virtual audience, that part didn't really work.
Pat, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I mean, for me, that was exactly the problem, was like the scheduling and just figuring out when I could actually watch things. So, I had really meticulously planned out by like the pink coded screenings, but then I kind of wasn't clear for the second screenings that they were actually available longer, and like, what the availability was. So I found like I didn't really try anything new that I hadn't like already like slotted into my list to do, versus I found like with TIFF, when it was like, okay, on this day everything is available for 48 hours, I knew what I could watch and when, and then I still had time to like, play Tetris and add something in, versus
Exactly.
Like
there was less discovery available. I found, for me, where that's exactly, with New York, with TIFF, I was like, oh, what else can I watch now?
Yeah.
So funny, the way that Park City works, it is so restricted to what you're doing. And a fundamental thing for those that haven't been is that the public premiere will take place on one day, and it could be 2, 3, sometimes 4 days away from that public premiere before the press screening takes place. So a huge chunk of actually being at Sundance is actually not only trying to use your 10 ticket pulls, but to negotiate with publicists to get same day tickets, to get up at 7 o'clock in the morning and stand in line to get a ticket for whatever big thing's coming out. So in a weird way, I actually didn't mind the virtual experience, because a lot of the bullshit I had to deal with went away. And once I finished a film, I could just see what was in the slot and just choose something else to watch. I would have much preferred that those slots were 24 hours rather than 3 hours. That's the thing that I found very frustrating, is that you would it was a needless thing. At TIFF, it sort of did, each day there was a bunch of stuff. So if you watch 4 films and you want to watch 6, you just pick one of the 2, some of them that played this morning. Manuel, you have as much experience about negotiating all that nonsense as I do. You might be a red badge guy. Are you a red badge guy when you go to Sundance?
I am, so I don't have to. I can literally walk into premieres, and I also have sort of the express whatever badge, virtual one, which is like I didn't have to reserve tickets ahead of time, and I literally could just.
Manuel is better than us. This is what we're learning.
But in that way, like it just reminded me, like it was a way of replicating the Park City experience, because like sometimes so much of being in Park City is like, can I make it from here to there, like, and it sets your schedule. So it is sort of needless in that, like in virtual cinemas, like you really don't need to have that restriction, but you wonder like what kinds of conversations were happening sort of beyond that. But
And Shane, are you somebody, sorry, Manuel, Shane, are you somebody that is a super planner, that you're going film by film to decide what you want to see ahead of time, reading all the descriptions, that sort of thing?
Well, I was gonna say, I'm actually surprised that you guys had issues, because I found it very easy for me. I think if you don't, focus on going to the premieres, then you can schedule your time a lot better, because essentially you have the first screening, and then after that you have like another 48 hours basically. So a lot of the films I watched weren't the premiere screening. So then I was able to switch around, and like sometimes I even change what movie I was going to watch based on the buzz. So I was very flexible. So it worked for me. I actually found TIFF a bit more difficult. I don't know, I just felt more relaxed at this festival. With TIFF, you had was it 48 hours or 24 hours for each one? Was it 48?
I think it was 48.
Sure.
Okay.
For most, yeah, most for 48.
For most, yeah.
I mean, my thing, I think to Rachel's point, it's that sense of discovery. And one of the reasons that lunatics like me stay to the bitter end is I can be very experimental with my choices sort of at the beginning, but I know if something big is coming up that I have the sort of last 3 or 4 days of the festival, because they add so many screenings. So after most people have left by the Monday or Tuesday of Sundance, I have those extra few days. I mean, here we are recording this on the Saturday. Sundance would still be going on. This would be the last day of Sundance. Traditionally.
I like that they had the award screenings. Yeah. So you got an extra chance, and I got into everything that I wanted to see on the award screenings day. So that was pretty good. So
picture 3 days of that, basically. Even before they get the awards, obviously we don't know quite when, but if it's something really big, it'll get added on the Thursday or the Friday, and they'll play on the 10th, which is something really good. But again, I'll go back and I'll ask everybody, am I alone? Nothing makes me happier. You talk about sense of discovery, than knowing nothing about a film. I don't even need to know the title. I'm like, let's just watch something. Or are you guys lean more towards the Victor model of ranking everything and getting everything sort of settled beforehand? We'll start with Pat.
I mean, I would say I'm more on the Victor side, in that like I have a pretty good sense of, like, I've gone through everything, read all the synopses, and I've sort of planned like what's worth covering. But I mean, I guess this is more of a physical festival thing, where like at TIFF, if I have an hour to kill, or 90 minutes, I might just go and see whatever is starting in Scotiabank at the next screen. And sometimes you get one of the best films of the festival, and sometimes it's okay. But this virtual festival I found didn't really allow for that, because it's sort of like you have like 32 minutes between this screening and the next, so you can kind of like go for a walk around the block, and that was it. I think I really only added one sort of buzz screening, which was Mass, because you recommended it. And even that, I watched it at like I think midnight, so like just to cram it in at the end of the day. But
to cite somebody who's actually not here, but also somebody slept on the same couch that Victor was on last year, Matt Hoffman, an occasional contributor to That Shelf, he called me and he said, you have to watch Mass. And so much of that is part of the festival experience, which frankly was absent. Like it was definitely a lonely festival experience. For all the pain in the ass that Sundance is, for all the pain in the ass that Park City is, for all the feeling like shit as you're walking around with no oxygen, I miss the camaraderie. That sense of community was certainly absent, and I wasn't going to watch a film like Glitch in the Matrix and then immediately go spend time in a virtual party. I mean, like there's just too much at play there. Manuel, I know that you obviously have particular beats that you're covering, as it were, but can you give me an example of that time where you just went to the 3 o'clock film because you had one at 1 and one at 6?
For this time around?
For any festival, are you somebody that walks in knowing nothing about a movie?
The only time I've done that, I'm like Victor. I'm like very methodical. I have a schedule. It's color coded. Like I know exactly what I'm doing. Usually in Park City, it's mapped so that I waste no time. But this time, and then I think it was whenever The Souvenir played at Sundance. That was a movie that I like. Me and a friend had some hours to kill, and we were like, "Oh, what's playing it here?" And then we walked in, and it was The Souvenir, and then everyone was talking about it. And it's a movie that I wouldn't have otherwise sort of have sought out, even though you think I would because of the Swinted connection. Um, but here, I will say that the one movie that everyone recommended that I wouldn't have sought out because I was so hesitant about it was At the Ready. And it wasn't until people were like, "No, you need to watch it. It's actually fantastic." Because otherwise, I stuck pretty much to my schedule, and I think it's also because there weren't that many big breakout movies that everyone was like, "Oh my God, you have to watch it, you have to watch it," that weren't already on everyone's radar. Like we were all going to watch Passing, we were all going to watch Coda, we were all, right, like Judas and the Messiah, like we were all already clicking to those, and I feel like there weren't those many discoveries of like everyone is talking about it and we have to go see it.
Rachel, you did our Coda review. That's one that it played the first day and everyone seemed to lose their mind for it. If you could talk about your experience of seeing the film, knowing what it was and seeing what the response was, because everybody talks about the festival bubble, particularly for Sundance. If you could discuss that from your own perspective.
Yeah, I mean, when I watched Coda, my immediate reaction was, this is a crowd-pleasing film that a festival audience will love. It is the same thing when Green Book played TIFF. It's like, an audience is going to get behind this for a number of reasons. It's a good film. Is it an amazing film? Maybe not so much story-wise, but again, you have this deaf cast, a hearing director, a hearing actress who has learned sign language for it. You have Marlee Matlin kind of being the go-between the hearing people on the crew and the deaf community of actors. So sort of the visibility of this community on screen is fantastic. These actors are great because there's one particular emotional argument scene that, we would be used to hearing shouting across the dinner table, and it is head to toe physical acting. And so in that part, like, that is impressive. On the whole, it's a good film. It's definitely one of the better films that I saw during the festival, but for sure that was the one that it's no surprise that audiences would get behind a movie like that.
And Victor, you've lived through the sort of up and downs with that. Was there any of the big films, the Passings, any of those features that you responded to and then were slightly put off by some of the critical consensus about it?
So I will say, even though I color code and I numerically rank all the films, by the time the festival actually comes around, it just evaporates. Like, I have pre-festival brain, so a lot of films I do walk into and I don't remember anything other than I rated it an 8 out of 10 for must see. So the one film that I was really impressed by was the Sparks Brothers, because I knew nothing about that band and I only seen it because of Edgar Wright directing it. And I walked away like just floored by it and had to go down a rabbit hole of checking them out on YouTube.
Manuel, same thing. You've certainly navigated all this stuff. Do you believe in festival hype, and what do you do to ameliorate it?
I do, but one of the things that I'm struggling with, especially with these virtual festivals, is that I don't know if it's harder to be in the bubble or if it's easier to be in the bubble. Because like I found myself, because I'm not having those conversations in the theaters or outside, and I tried to stay off social media for other reasons just currently, I wasn't really hearing that much. And I was just sort of sitting down and writing my review and sort of trying to see. And it wasn't until sort of later that I'm like, oh, everyone was raving about this movie or everyone was tweeting about that. So I feel like that the festival bubble was a little bit punctured because of that. And because more people who wouldn't otherwise have been in Park City were also now watching. So it wasn't that thing of like, oh, well, you're in Park City, so of course you're loving this film and none of us are going to get to watch until 8 months later when it plays TIFF or whatever. So it just felt odd, and it probably for better and for worse, because I think that the more people watch these films and the more people get to be part of that conversation, I think the better it makes the critical discourse.
Absolutely agree with that. Equally agree that so much of the people that accuse festival bubble are people that haven't watched the films, right? So it's a feeling of being outside of the bubble. It's a VIP room kind of sensitivity. And I absolutely agree that there's groupthink and that absolutely takes place. But equally, there's this cynicism that it's not possible for something truly amazing to have played at Sundance. Now, that being said, again, I can attest for this the way that the Cannes Film Festival works. By day 6 or 7 of Cannes, which is much more spread out, which like Parasite played on day 8 of the festival, right? By the time you get to day 6 or 7, there's a palpable panic that they hadn't seen a masterpiece yet. Like there's this whole notion that, is this festival a complete waste and we haven't gone anywhere, which is why I find it very interesting that Sundance, like TIFF, is very front heavy. Like most of the big films that were playing, it was that opening day slot. Now, what made it really interesting, again, from the outside this year, if you look last year, there were 4 films that played. 3 of them had been sold already or were Netflix. And the only one that was actually up for stuff was Bad Hair. And everybody wanted to get into that screening. I was in a tent where 350 to 400 people with tickets didn't get to see Bad Hair because all the people who were there to buy the film were taking up space. So again, for all the problems with technology and all of the other issues, some of the fundamental bullshit notions of Sundance disappeared in a virtual environment. You had more people with more voices, which was great, but you equally had none of that sense that you couldn't get into a screening that was a premiere because the 5th assistant of some sort of producer was actually in for there. There's my little rant about what all the nonsense of Sundance. Pat, go ahead.
Was anybody not able to watch something that they had planned to watch? Like, was there a sold out screening or were you cut off from the purple?
For me, it was just Together on the last day, and Pleasure were the 2 that were sold out on the 3rd. But again, I have a day job, so I can't start watching a movie at 10 a.m. So for me, by the time I look at 3 p.m., they were gone. So those are the only 2 instances where I had trouble.
Okay.
Yeah, my only thing was Philly DA I meant to watch, and I got a phone call, and then I started to watch at 12:02, and it had stopped. I hadn't hit play yet.
Oh no.
so that 100% my fault. But the fact, I mean, again, you guys can probably agree that sometimes being able to pause the movie and go to the bathroom is one thing. But do you find yourselves watching movies differently, or like we're all professionals, we're doing our stuff? But do you find it a fundamental different thing that if you're getting that phone call in the middle or the important email, that you're simply not losing yourself into the film the way that you would normally?
I found I had to actively like put my phone in a different room this time. And like, I think doing TIFF and other virtual festivals has helped with that.
Right.
But it's definitely not the same, you know, watching it in a dark room. Because even like, you know, there were days where like my cat wanted to go outside and was like screaming at the door or just like, you know, things like that. And like, you can turn off your phone, but you can't turn off the cat. And so there's a lot going on.
Yeah, I mean, it should be no surprise because Pat and I tend to like the same sort of movies. And yeah, same thing. It's like my phone is in another room, but I'm looking outside at the window, and then the cat has wandered in. Oh, so the neighbor has come home. So there's those little distractions that you wouldn't have in a theater. And I do think that I don't enjoy movies as much as I would in a theater. And I mean, not to a huge degree. You know, a good movie is still a good movie, a bad movie is still a bad movie. But I think some of those borderline movies I probably would have liked a lot more sitting in a theater with an audience.
Now, Victor, you're somebody that likes sort of being in your head during these festivals at the best of time. Did you find the navigating of this festival better or worse than last year?
I found it pretty straightforward and easy for me because, to be honest, like I try not to check my email even when it's not a movie running. So I'm pretty good about sitting down and focusing and getting everything out of the way. And I don't even take bathroom breaks when I'm screening a movie at home. It's like once it starts, I'm sitting my butt down for 2 hours.
Yeah, I'm the same. I'm the same way. But Pat, you laugh.
Well, I mean, what's the point? Like you enjoy the film more if you just pause it,
the
as opposed to, you know, just like rocking back and forth in your chair and being like, I don't want to stay in the couch.
You're not wrong, and yet it's something I absolutely share that neuroticism with
well,
Victor.
don't get me wrong. I go to the bathroom and get everything out of the way first. I'm not sitting there torturing myself. But if it was a kind of marginal need to go, I'm not going to stop it to go do it. And again, like filmmakers, they spend hundreds of hours editing their film to get the tension and the timing just so right. It's like being on a roller coaster and getting halfway up the top of the first dive and then stopping and then coming back. It kind of kills it, right? You're not experiencing it as it was meant to be seen.
Yeah.
Look, I'm the person that believes that anybody who leaves a film should not review the film, period. It's different. So in other words, pausing at home, yes, it interrupts the flow, but that's much better than the people get up and go to the bathroom for 15 minutes in the middle of the movie and then still review it. That's a whole nother conversation to have. Obviously we all had a pretty good experience. Might as well start with Manuel. Is there some particular highlight? Is there something that you want to focus on? Something about this that you'll remember?
I mean, one of the fun discoveries of the film, because I was looking forward to it, but I was very apprehensive, was Together, which I ended up loving, and it was probably my favorite fiction film of the festival. Patty Harrison is a goddess, and she deserves everything, and it was just so funny. I thought I was getting a Sundance drama, and I think like we all know sort of what that looks like or what that sounds like, but this just was something that I rarely see, and it was romantic, but not about romance, and about friendship, and about it was queer, but it was not. I just loved it, and I'm looking forward to revisiting again because I just wanted to live in it for a little bit longer.
Fascinating. Shane, was there something that really that you really responded to?
For me, the one that was outstanding was Flea. And I'm glad I got to see it early on and be part of the first wave of responses. And as I said, the docs in general were pretty strong. And Mass, that was the one film that I added based on the buzz. I think everything else was what I had originally planned, apart from the award screenings. So I'm really glad I caught Mass. Mass was pretty good. And I'm glad I caught it at Sundance because I'm not sure if it's even going to get picked up. It's such a hard sell. So you might not be seeing Mass being released for a while. So I'm really glad I got to see it at Sundance.
Rachel, anything stand out?
I love Mass, but one of the movies that I keep thinking about is one that I didn't particularly like, called The Blazing World. And that is a movie that was written and directed and starring Carlson Young. And it's rare to see a movie that is so singularly somebody's specific personal vision. And she managed to do a lot. Udo Kier is in it. Vanessa Shaw, Dermot Mulroney, and it's this weird, bizarre fantasy thing, and it's kind of beyond description even. It was just so unusual, and she managed to do so much with a small budget and this strange narrative that it's just something that I keep thinking about, and I would love to see what she would do with a straightforward narrative.
There you go, Victor.
I had a really great time during the festival because it was just, everything was so smooth. I didn't have to run around anywhere. I had time to write. It was easy to see what I wanted to see. But there was a trade-off in that I didn't really love anything. I saw about 24 movies, and none of them, I'm not going to be returning to them anytime soon. I'm not really singing their praises. The only plus was I only seen one thing I kind of hated, which is pretty good. In a festival, when you see like 24 movies, you expect there to be 5 or 6 that really bother you. So it was like, low floor, low ceiling, maybe I would say.
There you go. And Pat?
Yeah, well, I mentioned Flea already. Like for me, that was, far and away the standout. I think really one of the few films that did something really new. I would also highlight, I don't think it was one of the best, but I really enjoyed Romeo and Juliet. I thought it was just like, one that like I kind of wanted to watch as like a Shakespeare and film fan. And I thought they did it very well in terms of like integrating social media. It was just so clever in how they would found like the right gifs to like match Shakespearean verse, and just like the tempo and like knowing like the art of the sexy follow back was really good. And that's when like I don't see it really having much of a shelf life because social media and technology changes so much. But I thought it was really fun and, you know, pretty original. And I would also put Jockey as a highlight, mostly for the performances. And, you know, it reminded me a lot of The Rider, you know, just like a beautifully composed film. And but yeah, those were the highlights, I would say.
Yeah, for me, there are certain films that I sort of expect, and it's so funny. I will still pigeonhole. I will see a bunch of Cannes films that play Sundance and a bunch of Sundance films that play Cannes, if that makes any sense. Captain Fantastic is a good example. Something that played Sundance and nobody gave a shit, and then it goes to Cannes and actually wins a bunch of awards because it actually plays better with distance from what it's about. I think Jockey, for me, yeah, it's very much like The Rider. Jockey was exactly what I thought the movie was going to be. Coda was I think very, very, very audience friendly. I'm surprised about the critical sort of orgasm around it, but nonetheless, I think it's perfectly fine. And it's exactly the kind of sort of semi feel good, but a little bit edgy film that we get. We've had music teacher and sign language films before. This one's Joni Mitchell instead of John Lennon. That all plays, whether it's Mr. Holland's Opus or it's or Coda. That stuff will actually play out. But Mass is just so much better than it was until the last 15 minutes. And that, I think, if you just watch all of Mass and then it sort of ended where you sort of feel it's going to end, it would be the film I expected to be. But then there's this moment that just for me absolutely elevated it, and it made it harder. It made it more challenging. I think of a film like President, which an incredible doc, absolutely phenomenal. But you watch that and you want to feel the sense of hope, that sense of uplift, but it's really depressing. And it does not give you that in a way that many of the docs that were celebrated are still, even at a place like Sundance, which is meant to be so edgy and so on your seat, people gravitate towards the things that actually make them feel pretty good. It's really interesting that way. I had hoped in a virtual environment that people will be a little bit step away from that and delve into some of the ones that are a little bit more challenging. As we discussed, there's certainly stuff that is well worth celebrating. But for me, Sundance at its best is when you actually have something that changes the way you see things. And my final point, I know I've been going on about this, I think Summer Soul is great, but I think a lot of people don't realize what a big deal it is. I'm that evangelical lunatic talking about, look, this is a really big deal. Even if you like it, I think you're not realizing how big of an important film this is for this particular period of music, how erased this particular show was, given the way that everything else was documented for lots of various reasons. So if you can get something like that, an opening night film, which is a lot of fun, that has a lot of great music, and people watch like, yeah, it's fine. It's a music doc. It's like, I'm that schmuck, usually wandering around Park City, pulling my hair saying, do you know how good Boys State is? Do you know how good Overnighters is? So I missed a little bit about that, of being the lunatic on the street corner, but nonetheless, we had lots of groups on social media and within us that we could actually do to celebrate. So overall, for me, I thought it was a very positive film festival. I saw a lot of stuff that I liked. I didn't see so much that I didn't like, and I saw some stuff that I wouldn't have normally seen that actually I really responded to. So for me, whatever. But will I go back to Park City if it's ever back in Park City? You know it. Now, last thing, for those that have not been to Sundance, does this make you want to go to Park City and see these movies, or do you think you got a taste of it? And if it was virtual, you would do it again, but you wouldn't do the schlep of actually flying there and doing all the nonsense that you have to do to get to Park City. Shane.
That's a tough question because I'm scared of the weather and the people always complaining that they get sick. I don't want to get sick. But I do love festival atmospheres in general. And Sundance seems like it has a great festival atmosphere. So I would like to experience it maybe once just to get that Park City atmosphere.
There you go. Rachel?
I'm with Shane. I would pretty much do any festival in person at least once. So I'd love to do it.
And Pat, did this make you want to go more or less?
Oh, 100% go more. It was nice to sort of see it unfolding and not feel like you're missing out and kind of, being part of it. And I think, I was really thinking while watching it, like, I wonder if more festivals are going to shift their industry screenings online as a result of, now that they've adapted and tried it out. And I really hope they don't. Because I think, Sundance did, I think, the best job of festivals in terms of replicating the festival experience with like the Q&As and the intros and whatnot, but it's not the same. And it definitely really made me, crave getting back to the live festival thing. And I would definitely want to try it again.
Victor, you've been once. What are your thoughts?
I miss the festival buzz. I miss the energy. I miss mingling with people. I miss talking to people in the lineups for an hour. It's like you just can't replace that. This is a much more clinical approach. You see it in a bubble. You can see it a bit more objectively. You have more time to work. But, just you go to films to feel something, and there's nothing like the high you get from a festival buzz.
Mm-hmm. Manuel?
Yeah, same. I feel like I'm craving the communal aspect of movie going. I think that also when we're talking about a festival bubble, I also wonder whether that's also part of it. It's like being not just with critics, but with audiences who schlep all the way to Park City, all the way to Toronto, all the way to Cannes, all the way to Venice, like that you're always surrounded by people who are like really into, well, except some industry people, so we're really into sort of this movie watching. And I wonder how something like Summer of Soul would have played. Like it would have played gangbusters at the Eccles, something like Coda. Like I just know they would have been a very different experience. And sometimes it would have uplifted the movies and sometimes it would like brought them down. But I think that somehow is so central to how we experience movies that now going into a year of me watching them in my laptop or on my television, everything starts looking the same. Like everything's been flattened to the point where like I now have a hard time being like, was this a good movie, or was this a movie that was able to just like keep me interested, or am I just being nitpicky? Like the cinematography, I miss like even just the texture and the sort of the materiality of the film and film going. Like I'm craving that, and I know that that's one of the things that I really enjoy about film festivals, and I don't think we're going to get them anytime soon, which is all that more depressing.
I mean, I'm privileged and/or have sacrificed to have a setup at home, which is better than the Egyptian. So if I'm watching a Sion Sono film with a really remarkable sound mix, I mean, the film's a mess, but it actually had a really good sound mix. There's a bunch of films that I saw that I thought, I feel so bad for people who are watching this on a laptop where it's just going to sound sort of muted and rumbly, that they're not getting this sort of 50 to 60% of the film experience is just how the thing sounds. The back end technology, I'm not going to go too nerdy into, but it is the same New Zealand company that everybody's using to actually screen it. I thought it looked pretty good. There were actually fewer artifacts at Sundance than there were at TIFF, which from this guy I found really interesting, that they've actually improved the screening from September until now. But some of the greatest experiences of my life have been in these, we talk about bubbles in a sort of negative sense, but the island of the film festival, where everyone's there and sort of working in some good way to celebrate cinema, and to be able to walk on Main Street and run into, the random person who's there, because why else are they there? They're not in Park City just to hang out. TIFF is a little bit different because there are people in Toronto, normally Toronto, but when people are coming from out of town, that's one thing. But especially when you're in Park City, you have that sense that everyone's there as part of a shared communal experience. And we miss that. Yes, I've met people, incredible filmmakers on the bus at Park City, people who Oscar nominated filmmakers who are just taking the bus from the Eccles to the library, and you're just having a conversation with them about what they loved. We simply are not going to get that. So I share all of your sentiment. Let us one day get back into theaters, but let's also celebrate that we actually had a chance to see some films that hopefully shaped us. And I have a feeling, we talk about whether or not we're watching these films again. I look forward to actually seeing a couple of these films in a couple of months and seeing how they stand up. And I encourage everybody to look at our coverage here at That Shelf. There's more stuff actually coming. We have more things coming along. I'd like to thank all of you for contributing and helping with year's coverage. It really means a lot to me. Plenty more to come all throughout the year for us to sort of build up this home of us celebrating these films and finding ways in these crazy times to form our own form of community. So thank you guys so much. Thank you guys so much. Please subscribe. Please follow us on social media. And thanks so much for watching this rundown of the 2021 Sundance International Film Festival.